Hey there, and good evening. Happy Sunday. What is it, March 10th? Holy cow, the month is flying by. I hope you guys made it through the daylight savings time change successfully. Be careful out there. There's a much greater risk of accidents, both from yourself and from distracted drivers. Uh, the couple of days following a when the clock jumps ahead and people are a little snoozy on the road. Um, so, as you know, you may not know, we are DPF Guys based in Atlanta, Georgia. All we do is 100% diesel after treatment service. And that's going to be everything from the EGR cooler down through the DOC, the DPF, the SCR, DEF injection, all that type of stuff. And most of our customers are truck drivers, people that have over the road semis or fleets with many, many, many trucks. Um, and everywhere in between. But we also service passenger vehicles, the medium duty trucks, the F-250s, 350s, and the Ram 2500s and 3500s and beyond. So if you drive a tow truck or hot shot, anything like that, by all means, give us a call. And of course, stuff that's even not a vehicle, generators, pumps, rock crushers, etc. We like to say if it's got a diesel engine and after treatment, we can clean it. Just a quick warning, if you anything you hear here is, I think decent advice, but obviously you want to check with your mechanic before you do anything or choose not to do anything. And just double check, make sure that what we're telling you is correct. Anything we talk here about pricing is just a rough estimate and not to be considered any sort of quote. So, anyway, onward. Normally these shows are scripted. I take your questions, I write the answers, but I wanted to try something different, and specifically because over and over again we get a very similar set of questions and see a very similar set of problems that are affecting the Freightliner Cascadia with the DD13 or DD15 engine, and specifically a 2015 model year. Now, that's not only 2015. You'd be looking at kind of all iterations of that model year. So, later in 2014, all of 2015, early 2016, people have one box failures. I want to get into that. That will involve an issue that we'll talk about in depth. Specifically, there's a programming issue with the fuel mapping. But along with that, I was thinking, are there any other issues that the Freightliner Cascadia does suffer from, specifically that the 14, 15, 16, this might actually impact all of them. And I checked with a couple of mechanic friends of mine, and they mentioned that there's an issue with the oil pickup manifold and with some specific O-rings on there. Again, I don't want to butcher what they're actually called or the technical terms for them. But apparently, after 400 or 500,000 miles, things have a tendency to get brittle, and O-rings fail. And there's an issue where it won't be sucking up the oil properly. You will develop low oil pressure, and it can really damage your engine. It's not a big problem to fix, but what I'm going to do is just a few minutes ago, I recorded a conversation with James James Boshiers from JB Mobile Diesel Repair, and so I want to have him kind of speak to this. So I'm going to play that. And then once that's done, we'll talk about it a little bit more, and we'll get into this one box thing. So if you happen to have a 2014, 15, or 16 Freightliner Cascadia, stay glued to your seat because we're going to be talking just to you. So, all right, let's get the video with James going here. And here we go. Hey, James, can you hear me? Hear me loud and clear?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
All right, folks. So James is so good looking, he was afraid that if he showed his face that people would be stalking him. So he's audio only. So I've got on here James Boshiers from JB Mobile Diesel Repair, 678-760-9000. Now, many of you know that, of course, we are DPF guys. It's all we do is clean DPFs. And people often ask, do you take things off the truck and put them back on? And we don't actually touch the truck. We always work either with your mechanic, if you happen to have one. Happy to, meet your mechanic and work directly with them. And if you don't have a mechanic that you know and trust, We've got a couple of really good people we work with, and James is definitely one of them. Now he's mobile, but what that means is you still come to our shop at 636 Cordell Drive in Atlanta. But James will meet you there. He'll do the remove, the reinstall, and the reset. We call it the 3 Rs. And so what you'd say, hey, meet me there. In fact, James, I think you might have somebody meeting you tomorrow morning. Someone coming in town. You schedule with him. He'll meet you at our shop. Wait for the truck to cool down. He'll snatch the filters off the truck. We walk him into the shop. We get started on them right away. Our process, as you may or may not know, does take 24 hours for all the cleaning and baking and testing and everything. So he then comes back the next day, puts everything back on the truck, and then hooks up his laptop to reset your soot levels and everything else. And I'll be asking James here in a second kind of what his history is and everything else, but he is a full service mechanic with many years of experience. So, while my work with him primarily is the removing and reinstalling of DPF, DOC, SCR, EGR coolers, etc. He is full service. So if there's anything that you need on your truck, either while you're working with us or even completely independent from us, give him a call, 678-760-9000. He's an awesome dude and a good friend of DPF Guys. So James, welcome. Thanks for taking a few minutes out of your Sunday while you wait for your ribeyes to get cooked to join us on the show. So once we get done talking to James here, I'll get back to work here. And the one thing I really wanted to talk about is the 2014, 15, 16 Freightliners and some of the one box issues. And we'll get to that after we're done talking to James. But there's another issue that is a small problem that can become a big problem that I thought I would just add to the mix, and it could save somebody a lot of hassle, a lot of money. And it was something, in fact, I took a note here. The oil manifold O-rings. And so I asked James if you wouldn't mind, talking to us for a minute and talking about what to watch out for. Can you preventatively replace this stuff? What happens if this problem actually does occur? What you shouldn't do, what you should do, and so go from there. So James, what do you know about this oil pickup tube, or the O-rings and all that type of stuff? Tell us more about that.
So yeah, on the D13s and DD15s, there's an oil pickup tube in the oil pan, plastic, and coming off those off the oil pickup tube, there's two what we call the oil manifold pipes that have quad rings on them, and over time, those O-rings will get hot, and you'll start getting a low oil pressure code. And then it'll turn into a very low oil pressure code. So we usually see that start happening around 400,000 to 500,000 miles. You'll wake up in the morning, or you'll get in your truck in the morning, and the oil's cold, and you'll have great oil pressure. But as the oil gets thinner, it starts bypassing the quad rings, and so then you'll start getting that infamous low oil pressure code, and then it'll go to a very low oil pressure code.
So, but there is some warning, though. You do get some. It doesn't just happen without any warning at all.
No, it doesn't just happen without any warning. But if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you start getting that code and you have to drive it, it's probably going to do damage to the engine.
Okay.
In the past, once you do get that code, most shops will notate that on their invoice that, hey, you came in with this code, and so if there's any damage to the bearings, we're not responsible, but we will replace the O-rings. So it's always best to do a preventative maintenance on that, because it is a known problem with those engines.
No, is that just they drop the oil pan and replace it that way? Is it a big job? Is it a medium, small? What would you consider it?
It's not a very bad job. It's about a 4-hour process. You'll jack it up where you can get the oil pan down past the axle, and you'll need O-rings, the quad rings for the manifold tubes, and you'll also need, I think they hold like 44 quarts of oil, and you'll need an oil pan gasket. So yeah, so it's not a terribly big job. It's it's something that can be done in 3 or 4 hours.
And is it something that even if you don't have the code and your truck has 4 to 500,000 miles on it, you'd recommend probably getting that done?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend getting that done if you haven't had it done yet. Just because we know that's one of the main problems that a lot of the trucks nowadays have. The problem with these gaskets and these O-rings on these trucks now is once they get any sort of miles on them, the heat and the oil impacts them, and it really takes a toll on the O-rings. So you end up start having leaks everywhere.
And that's a lot of people when they buy a secondhand truck from a dealer like Arrow, whatever it is. A lot of times they're fleet trucks, and more often than not, the fleet trucks are sold at about exactly 400,000 miles. So I is it something you'd recommend that if somebody was buying, a fleet truck, good condition, well maintained, if there's not some notation on the maintenance records that that part has been replaced, would you say that you would budget some money to get that done?
Yeah, I would definitely get that done. If you're buying a truck and you don't know the history on it, you don't have any history on the maintenance, and you don't know if that has been done, yeah, I would definitely look into saving some money and getting that done.
Okay. Yeah, because one of our other mechanic buddies was telling a story about, and that's what kind of got this to my attention. That's why I was asking you about it. Where one of his customers needed an engine rebuild because this happened, and where that oil uptake manifold, the tube, failed somehow, and he apparently probably got all sorts of warnings. I think the engine even shut off on him, but he turned it back on, and I think only ran it for a few seconds, and that was enough to fry the engine. So it's definitely ounce of prevention, many pounds of cure, is what it sounds like.
Yes.
Okay. And is that something that you could, I'd mentioned about, you doing work like this, at our shop, that sort of thing. If someone needed that help, could you do that in our, in front of our shop, like you do a lot of the work?
Yeah, yeah. It's not a, like I said, it's not a big problem. It's something I could do in a couple hours, get you
Okay.
back on the road.
Cool beans. Well, tell you what, that's really it. It's, I told you about 10 minutes. I think we got 8 minutes and 18 seconds in here. If you want to, tune in the live on YouTube, that'll be going, right after we finish this. I will introduce this and play it. Do you have anything else you want to share with somebody, like how to get a hold of you? And, I've got your phone number on the screen. I do, I can vouch for, the quality of your work and your professionalism, and James is also one of the best diagnosticians out there. So if you've got a problem that's been plaguing your truck, please, don't hesitate to reach out and talk to and meet with James. I think you'll be very happy with it. And hope you're not blushing too hard, James, because I'm, 'cause I did. But hey, thanks for taking a few minutes out of your day. Enjoy your dinner, and I'm going to get back to doing the show here.
All right, man.
Take
Have a
care.
good night. All right. Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.
There we go. That was definitely informative and really important to think about. So look down at your odometer if you've got a Freightliner with a DD15 or DD13 engine, and you've got 500,000 miles plus and haven't had this looked at. You may want to replace that oil uptake tube or oil manifold, and if you start getting lows, here's the problem. I was talking to James offline before he started, and the deal is you'll get uh, oil pressure codes and things like that. And as you know, when you're driving truck, that sort of problem doesn't happen when you're 2 blocks away from the dealership. It happens when you're up in the mountains, out in the middle of nowhere, and you'll just be like, well, I'm just going to keep driving until I can get closer to someplace. And all of a sudden, your engine goes "Erp," and you're really shot. So it does sound like this is not a tremendously big job, but if you don't do it, it's going to catch you off guard, and you're going to be on a tow truck and needing a much more major engine work, if not a full rebuild. Anyway, but let's get to the kind of the meat of the matter here, which is what I wanted to talk about. If you do need to get a hold of me, we are, DPF Guys, 404-999-1361. Our address is 636 Cordell Drive in Atlanta. Call or text us with your questions, and we'll do your best to help you. I like to show off my visual aids here. So 404 999 1361, text or call. So when we started doing this in Atlanta, coming up on almost 5 years ago now, and we would service the one boxes on these Freightliners and do quite a good job. We can clean them really well. When you need your DPFs cleaned on a one box, we recommend on a Freightliner Cascadia with the Detroit engine with the one box. We recommend pulling the whole one box off and cleaning the whole thing. And I'm not just saying that because it costs a bit more, but it does only cost a bit more. And if I can help inform you kind of how this all works, on if you're not familiar with the Freightliner one box, the Detroit one box, it's everything is in one box. That's why they call it a one box. And by everything, I mean all of your after treatment stuff. So it have the two it has DOCs, DPFs, and SCRs. Now, I use plural because it does have two of each. Now, the latest generation of Freightliner with the Detroit engine does have still has a one box, but they've simplified the design. But that's a conversation for another day. We're talking about the older ones, the 14s, 15s, and 16s. So those, that Cascadia that had a DD15 or DD13 engine and had a one box in it. But the problem is or was allegedly that there was a fuel mapping issue in that range of model years. Now, again, we're going to call it a 2015, but understand that would include late 2014, early 2016. So what I've been doing, I used to say, yeah, let's bring it in and clean it. But let me get back to, why we want to, I'm going all over the place here. That's good. I don't have a script. But so I tell people that if you need to get your one box serviced on any of these Detroits with the one box, pull the whole thing off and clean the entire thing. And the reason I say that is because, again, it's got two of everything. So if you just clean the filters, you're going to have to do 2 DPF cleanings, and that's going to cost you about $600 for the two of them, about $300 a piece. So now you're at $600. And then you need to replace the clamps and gaskets. Again, there's two, so there'll be 2 of everything inside. There's 2 wide band clamps with big nuts on them, and graphite liner inside. And those are about $100 a piece. So now you're at 600 plus 200. Now you're at 800. And then there's 2 V clamps, 2 crush gaskets. So altogether, you have about let's say $600 worth of service, $400 worth of parts. You're at $1,000. Plus, it's actually more labor for the mechanic to take the filters out than it is to drop the whole one box, believe it or not. If you're a mechanic watching this and you haven't dropped a one box, it's actually 8 bolts. It's actually easier than getting in there and having to weasel these filters out. And also, when you work on the one box when it's off the truck, you can get better fit when you put the filters back in. It's not easy to get the filters in, to get the clamps to seat and everything, and will often produce exhaust leaks, and that can be messy and can even start a fire in your truck. Anyway, so we drop the whole one box. And when you do that, not only do you get your DPFs properly cleaned and reinstalled so that they're not, there's no exhaust leaks and everything's put in perfectly. We'll also clean your 2 DOCs. We'll clean any of the DEF buildup out of your SCRs. We'll clean up all of the any of the crust, any of that DEF buildup inside the dosing port and the decomposition or the blending, the mixing chamber. We get the whole thing clean. It also lets us really inspect it interior. We use a borescope to get in there to look for any hairline cracking or anything like that. And the difference in price between doing just your 2 filters with the parts you need and doing the whole one box, which will also include all the parts you need, is about $600 or $700. So you only have to get that one box cleaned every 300,000 or 400,000 miles. So I recommend doing the whole thing. Now, if you just want to get your filters cleaned, we can totally do that. So don't be discouraged, but we will encourage you to do the entire one box. Now, Let's talk about the specifics about the 14, 15, and 16, or the 2015 with a little bit, bleeding over into late 2014 and early 2016. If you call me or text me and say, I've got a Freightliner Cascadia with a Detroit engine, that's great. I might explain to you the difference between getting just the filters clean versus the one box. But then when you tell me that you've got a 2014, 15, or 16 Cascadia with the one box, um, I'll stop you and say, you may not even want to waste the money on a cleaning. And the people are always like, why do you say that? And I'll say, let me ask you a question. And and they're like, go ahead. What's the question? I'll say, well, does the truck run fantastically if it's bobtail, or does it run really well? Excuse me, I'm fighting a cold here. Does the truck run really well if you're lightly loaded on a flat road? They're like, yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. And I'm like, well, what happens when you've got 20, 30, 40,000 pounds in the back and you're going up a grade? And they'll say, oh, I get a DEF quality code when the truck is laboring. Or I get a SCR efficiency code, or I get a NOx conversion code, but it's usually DEF quality. And I think there are engineers at Detroit or Daimler that have a sick sense of humor, or maybe the German doesn't translate as well to English. But getting a DEF quality code, what's your first thought? Oh, I must have bad DEF. So then you drain your DEF and you refill the DEF. You replace your DEF header for $1,300. You do all sorts of tests for the DEF delivery and everything else, because it's telling you've got DEF quality. So you're like, well, it must have something to do with my DEF header. Um, but that's not the issue. It's actually, what it's telling you is that the NOx conversion, that the SCR, the selective catalytic reducer, is not reducing the NOx emissions from the engine properly. Now, don't quote me exactly what these numbers usually are, but uh, your after treatment control module, your ACM, is expecting that the SCR, and I get it, there's a lot of abbreviations here, but the SCR is the part that works with the DEF, is going to take the NOx from the engine. And let's say the amount of NOx coming out of that engine is 300 parts per million. And I think it's roughly that. And the what they're expecting that SCR to do, working with the DEF, is to reduce the parts per million of that NOx by about 90%. Um, the and so what you got there is it should be coming out of the engine at 300, and on the inlet NOx sensor. Oh, that's another thing you'll do too. You'll replace NOx sensors, replace the inlet NOx sensor, the outlet NOx sensor. You'll have $1,200 stuck into there and a bunch of labor. Um, but anyway, so you're like, well, there must be something wrong with the outlet NOx sensor. Replace that. That doesn't fix the issue. So what it should show is 300 out, on the inlet NOx sensor and 30 on the outlet NOx sensor. Again, those aren't exact numbers, but something like that. You should have, your inlet NOx should be up here and your outlet NOx should be way down here. And that's the job of the SCR. Um, but it's not converting NOx properly. Um, and what caused that, allegedly, was in that 2015 model year, we had a fuel mapping issue. And again, I'm not an engineer or a super smart mechanic like James or anybody else, but the fuel mapping, in a nutshell, this has to do with how much fuel is injected, for how many milliseconds is injected, how much air goes with the fuel. Um, and it was overdosing the fuel, is overfueling the engine. And that did two things. It would cause the engine to run a little bit dirtier. But the main thing is that it was producing too much heat downstream, too much heat down in the one box. And you could often see this because a one box that suffers from this will sometimes have it be discolored because of all the heat, not always, but sometimes. But so the one box has three main catalytic and filtering components in it. The first is the DOC. That's the catalyst. That's what produces the heat during a regen. The second is the DPF. That's the vacuum cleaner bag that catches all the crap, all the soot, and all the ash. And after that is the SCR. The SCR, the selective catalytic reducer, is where you spritz in the DEF. That SCR then gobbles up the NOx, converts it to other less harmful chemicals, and what comes out your tailpipe, believe it or not, is water and nitrogen. But if that SCR is not working properly, it won't convert the NOx. In fact, it can actually produce NOx, amazingly enough. And the reason that overfueling, that fuel mapping issue caused such a problem is that the other parts of the system, the DOCs and the DPF, are less susceptible to overtemp conditions. The SCR, on the other hand, the catalytic metals that are in there, and I believe it's vanadium, again, which sounds like something from the Marvel universe, like vibranium, has a melting or vaporization point of about 1200 degrees Fahrenheit. And so, if your engine is producing too much heat, for it will get that SCR up to 1200 degrees. It doesn't have to stay there very long, but definitely if it stays there for any amount of time, which it would because the engine is constantly overdosing the fuel, overdosing the mapping the fuel map is wrong, setting too much fuel, producing too much heat down the downstream. The SCR eventually just fails, stops working, or it sort of works because your truck will run great if you're bobtail or empty, but you're only making money if you got weight in the back, and that's when the thing will poop out on you. So again, remember what I said, your truck runs great if it's bobtail or lightly loaded on a flat road, but you put some weight on it, and head up an incline, it's gonna throw def quality codes. And then the solution to that is you pull it on the side of the road, regen it, and you're generally good to go. Um, but if so what I'll tell someone if they tell me that they've got a 2014, 15, or 16 Freightliner, I'll ask about those symptoms, and if they do have those symptoms, I simply say, "Don't even bother cleaning it. You're gonna need a new one box." Uh, Cleaning it won't solve anything, unfortunately. Now, again, in theory, I should be glad to take your money, um, but I would rather have somebody invest in a new one box, which you'll need to do to actually resolve this issue, than spend money on taking it off, cleaning it, putting it back on, all that type of stuff, and finding out that doesn't solve the problem. So I wish I had better news for those of you who have a 14, 15, or 16 Freightliner that are having this issue, but how I can save you money is in two ways. One is um, to uh, prevent you from having to go to the dealership and throw a bunch of parts of that thing unsuccessfully, and, parts, labor, diagnostics, etc., only to discover that you need a new one box after you've spent $6,000, on that journey. And then also you come to me and spend 1,600 bucks, 1,700 bucks getting it clean. That doesn't solve anything. So what I'd rather do is um, be honest with you and sell you a new one box. And when we do that, um, what you get is a brand new one box, and it will include DPF filters. So you get brand new filters as well. The only thing it doesn't include would be all of the sensors. Now, oftentimes when people come to us with this problem, they've already replaced some NOx sensors. The NOx sensors are good. You can move your sensors from the old box to the new one, and they all work just fine. I normally do recommend replacing the harness on the one box as well, because that has a tendency to get a bit cracked and crusty over time. And when you take it off the old one box and you're bending it around and putting it on the new one, oftentimes the insulation will crack and you'll get shorts and get electrical issues. So there you have it. We can definitely sell you a new one box. I'm not going to make you buy a new one box if you don't need to, but I'm also not going to make you pay for a cleaning. That's not going to do you any good. If you want to learn more about that, I think I've got a phone number for you to text: 404 999 1361. And all you have to do is just text me and say, "Hey, man, I got a 14, 15, or 16 Freightliner. I've got the symptoms you're talking about on your live, and I need some help." And I get it. A price for a new one box from us. Again, we'll have to quote you exactly, but it's going to be around 8 grand. And then the mechanic's going to charge you, James, who was just on here, James Borshears from JB Mobile. I know that he'd charge you about 850, 800, something like that, to take off the old one, put on the new one, and get you out of there. And we can get you in and out, the same day. And if need be, we can work up some creative financing and kind of work with you on that one. But I would rather have you spend $8,000 all at once than spend $15,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 over months of time and lose a bunch of revenue because your truck is not rolling. So I hope that helps. All right. So while I've been chatting about that, we had some questions come in, and we have uh, this amazing person just said, um, from Enemy Miss Bear, does the mechanic check other after treatment codes? Yes, absolutely. In fact, that's one of the things that we really pride ourselves on because, um, oftentimes someone will call and say, "Hey, I think I need my DPFs cleaned." And my thing is, well, yeah, it's probably not a bad idea, but let's make sure that's actually the root cause of the problem. So yes, he'll check the after treatment codes. My next week's show will be talking about the Freightliner M2 with the Cummins 6.7 engine. And so that's something where having this experience really does help because like James can say, "Oh, you've got a Freightliner M2 with a 6.7 with 250,000 miles." That normally indicates that you have one or more bad injectors, and he'll talk about that. So, yes, looking at the upstream issues is really important. And yes, James from JB uh, Mobile Diesel Repair can help you with that. If you need to get a hold of him, um, you can just text us and say, "Hey, give me James's number." You can give him a call. And we've had people come in thinking they need DPFs clean. It turns out that James discovers it's just simply a bad pressure differential or delta P sensor, and he replaces that, and those guys are back on their way. So, you don't always need us, but James can let you know if you do or not. All right, we've got another one here. This is awesome. Um, this could be caused by a plugged F dozer. I'm thinking you're talking about uh, the def quality code. Yeah, I mean that, and again, it's a silly code because it's pointing you in the wrong direction. And anything that causes the SCR to not fully uh, reduce the knocks as it should can definitely cause that code. Um, a plug def dozer is easy to very easy to determine. It's 3 bolts. You can just pop the def dozer off and use a soft damp cloth to clean off the nozzle of that thing. You can look to see if there's a big buildup of def crust around it. And who knows, you might pop that thing off, and that's the issue. There's just a big wad of built up def on there, or the metering valve or the def doser is not spraying properly. You just buy a new one of those, and you're on your way. Definitely try the cheapest stuff first. I would always, always, always check that. But Sir Gla, you're 100% right on that one, and that's easy to check and diagnose that. Don't even have to go to a mechanic for that if you feel a little bit handy. Um, Another one from Annie Mist Bear. Yes, the mechanics can determine the def flow by running a test. 100%. Um, and it's supposed to dispense so many milliliters per minute, and that's really easy to do. But if you've got a 2015 or 14, 14, 15, or 16 Freightliner, um, consider yourself lucky if that's actually the issue. It's usually not it. Um, See, yep. So this guy actually is a James from JB Mobile customer, and we'll definitely do that before we sling you a new one box. There's no sense if it just requires you know a, a wet toothbrush to scrub the def off your doser, or having to buy a new def doser for $500 versus a whole new one box for 8 grand. 100%, that's what you should do. But yeah, there's definitely some looking at those things is really key. And by the way, thank you all of you who have posted comments here. Anybody watching this on any of the socials that it happens to be at, please, if you have any questions, type them into the comments. We'll find them. We'll see those, and we can respond to you right away or talk to you in a future episode. Um, and that is really about it. I normally kind of try to talk about uh, the Clean Air Fleet fuel additive, which is also very beneficial. Can make your DPFs last longer between cleanings, use less def, et cetera, produce less NOx. In theory, if you had a 2015 vintage Freightliner that was just on the borderline, a good fuel additive might actually help buy some time, because if you can get your engine to produce less NOx, like for instance, if the one box is actually converting NOx right at the borderline of not doing it well enough, uh, using a fuel additive might be what you need to reduce the initial upstream NOx, which means that the SCR can keep up with it better. But like I said, we want to try everything we can. Want to try all the cheap stuff possible before we start digging into the expensive stuff, but want to make sure you're not wasting a lot of time and money, especially time, going down a dead end road, and we can help you with that. But all right, up we got from anything else come in here. I'm reading the live live stuff here. This is pretty awesome. Anyway, well, that's it. I mean, that's like, my big pitch for if you've got a 2015 vintage Freightliner with a DD13, DD15 Detroit engine and a one box, and you're having the dreaded def quality code, and it only seems to happen when the truck is laboring a little harder than usual. You probably have a bad one box, and we can help you get to the bottom of that and fix that problem as affordably and efficiently as possible. But anyway, so if you are not currently subscribed to our YouTube channel, do me a solid and hit that subscribe button. Make sure that you, of course, as they like to say, mash the thumbs up button. Definitely subscribe. Check us out on TikTok, DPF Guys on TikTok. We do a lot of good content there. And some of it is, it's all short and sweet, but gets right to the point of things. I'll be doing longer, more in-depth YouTube channel type stuff coming up, but you make sure that you subscribe and hit the like button so that you don't miss anything. If anybody out there would like to join me on this channel at some point on the show, let me know. I would love to talk to you and share your stories and everything else. If you do need to get a hold of me, even tonight, feel free to text me at 404-999-1361. And that, as they say, is that. Have yourself a wonderful and safe week, and keep on trucking. And if there's anything I can help you with, don't hesitate to reach out and say hello.